Those of you who are visiting, well, I should say there are connection cards, those yellow cards. Whether you've been here 1,000 times or first, be sure to let us know of your coming tonight. Let us know of that. And you also will have the opportunity to share prayer requests with us that our prayer teams will continue to hold up on your behalf and pray for. For those of you who may be new to us this evening, you have missed out on a tremendous opportunity of great humor and incredible cleverness on the part of puns having to do with sheep. And so this morning, or I should say this evening, I was asked, are you going to do another sheep pun? I said, you don't have to worry about that. I have mutton more to say on the topic. That came to me while I was sitting there. Yes, oh my, it is a disease. Maybe that should be a prayer request. Well, I really want us to think about the phrase, no Jesus, no peace. And to also think of that in the terms of no Jesus, N-O, no, N-O, peace. For it is only when Christ comes into our hearts that we can truly know peace. Not only peace with God, but peace with ourselves and peace with our community. Imagine the surprise that an individual experienced in it's either 1888 or 1889, when, after the death of his brother, he picked up the newspaper and noticed an obituary and began to read it, and noticed that the obituary wasn't for his brother, it was for him. Kind of like the comment from Mark Twain, the news of my death has been greatly exaggerated. But hear the words from this obituary. The doctor of death has died. For this was the man who invented dynamite. And dynamite, while it has certainly many good uses, many a farmer is thankful for dynamite, having to get a stump out. Many of our highways are thankful for the use of dynamite so that we can drive a shorter distance than rather around miles. Dynamite has been used a lot to kill people. As a matter of fact, the largest non-nuclear explosion in human history had to do with dynamite in World War I in Halifax. And if you ever have the opportunity to go to Halifax, it will look, when you see the pictures, like a nuclear bomb went off and just devastated the area. But this individual read about how, because of him, countless people have died. And he was also responsible for kind of funding and changing a business from being some kind of chemical manufacturer or some kind of industry, primarily into a military, making bombs and responsible for many people dying. And so he was heralded as the doctor of death. Well, he was given a remarkable opportunity from them, because when you're reading your own obituary, it probably means you have a chance to change the way that's written. And he said, I'm not going to allow this to be how I am remembered. And he had a change of heart, and he had a change in the way that he lived and in what became his focus. And his last name was Nobel. Ever hear of the Nobel Peace Prize? And he completely changed his ways. You know, unfortunately, the history of humankind is a history of violence. I Googled, how many years have we had without war? In 3,500 years of history, as best as they can count, 8%, 260 some years, have been without a major war going on somewhere. I don't think that speaks very well for humankind, does it? In Europe, from the years 1345 to 1945, Europe had at least 2 major conflicts per year for 600 years. We are now in the midst of what is looking to be our endless war in Iran, I'm sorry, not yet Iran, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. And wars and rumors of wars continue to mount, and every day we wonder what's going to happen with North Korea. And pick any number of other spots. We live with the threat of violence, not only on a national scale or even in a global concept, and not to make you don't think that because you see fallout shelter and evacuation routes, if missiles are launched, you have 12 minutes. And then the big flash, so you won't have a whole lot of time for anxiety. We live under the threat of war and violence and imminent destruction. And if that isn't bad enough, then let's just go, how about just here in the United States? That sometimes people say, we are a Christian nation, and they say it with great pride. What Christian nation has over 300 mass shootings in 1 year? What Christian nation has more gun deaths than any other nation in the world? What Christian nation incarcerates more of its people than any other nation in the world? Do you know that the United States accounts for 5% of the world's population? And a conservative estimate is that we own 50% of the world's handguns. And then it goes up to 75. Now, I'm not here to argue gun control or non-gun control. It's very interesting. We have that many guns, and I do hear people say the problem is that people don't have enough guns. And I do wonder about that. But that really, I'm not trying to talk about gun control here. But what I am here to talk about is there is something fundamentally wrong in the human heart, that it craves and it desires violence and it practices violence, whether it be as a nation, as a tribe, or as a family, or as an individual. There's a problem. And the heart of the problem is the problem with the heart. Did you catch that? The heart of the problem is the problem with the heart. If you don't have peace in here, how can you have peace anywhere else? And we don't find peace by what the marketers tell us, the accumulation of more stuff. We find peace by coming to the cradle, to the newborn King, to Jesus Christ, who is known as not only Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, but also the Prince of Peace. Larry Norman was a very popular Christian singer in the 1970s. If you're into contemporary Christian music from that era, probably the most defining album of that entire genre is his Only Visiting This Planet. And he talks about against the Vietnam War, he talks against the moon program drove him crazy, that we'd spent so much to send people to the moon, but we wouldn't fill empty spoons. I mean, he dealt with all kinds of social issues. But then he ended it this way. He said, "Don't ask me for answers. I've only got one, that a man leaves his darkness when he follows the sun." Pretty cool, yeah, pretty cool. So we're not talking about a self-help program. We're not talking about positive thinking. We're talking about radical reform of our heart because Jesus has come into our lives. And when the Prince of Peace lives in here, then we become people of peace. I love it's a prayer that we should have on our lips, if not every day, as oft as we can think of it. And it's the words of Francis of Assisi. Help me out. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Amen. And that happens by having Jesus' life in our hearts. Not up here. We've seen enough of just intellectual people that say, I'm Christian intellectually, and then they kill by the sword, or they lack grace, they lack compassion, No. We're looking for what the word Christian really means. Little Christ. Are you a little Christ? Am I a little Christ? This is where Christmas Eve invites us to recenter and to refocus our lives on Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith, who, when he comes into our heart, he brings peace, and he brings forgiveness, and he brings wholeness. Unfortunately, in our nation, as I stand here this evening, ladies, 1 in 4 of you will be subject to domestic violence, just based on statistics. And men, 1 in 7 of you will be subjected to that. Your odds of dying by a gunshot are amongst the highest in the world. There's a couple places that beat us, Somalia being one of them. But when you compare the violence or the statistics of homicide by a firearm to any other what we would call civilized place, Australia, Canada, England, Germany, France, we are multiple times higher than they are. There's a problem. And the heart of the problem is that there's a problem with the heart. That not enough people have come to know the peace of Christ in their life. And if we want to see our world changed, and if we want to see peace come to this world, it begins with our bending our knee before the Christ child. There's a wonderful hymn, and I was fortunate enough that we actually sang hymns in school when I still went. And we would sing, "Let there be peace on earth, with God as our Father, brothers all are we, let us walk one with each other in perfect harmony." But peace begins when we accept Jesus. So our admonition and our homily this evening is this. Have you come to the cradle? Have you taken in the life of Jesus and said, Jesus, help me to do it your way. Help me to follow you. And begin that journey. If you don't have a church home, we're happy to help with that. If you do, God bless you. See, Jesus has a big family, and we love and support one another. So let us know Jesus. Let us know his peace. And let us see beyond the tinsel and the lights and the packages and the shopping and all of that, and see the manger, to see that little cradle, and as I shared this morning, the first king-size bed. And let us bow our knee and our hearts and say, Jesus, let your peace live in my heart, and help me to take that peace to this world that so desperately needs to know it.
Amen.
Amen.